A refugee is found within the words of a speaker, a phantom speaker who urges us to sometimes unwelcome solitude. A refugee that hides words, problems, empty conversations, meaningless despair and consolation, internal dialogues that incite us to seek and deny, isolate, let go, and go back, or perhaps discover a little more within the internal walls that dictate these encouraging paths within paths of solitude. What if, perhaps, self reflection makes assumptions of possible spiritual elevations every day, or just one day? Or perhaps they are simply making it difficult to navigate society? Dialogues that cross a conscious mind, in this case, surrounding or resounding with insights like the often mentioned but little understood imposter syndrome. This is Stefania, your voice for today. Today we will talk about imposter syndrome. Let's contextualize a bit about what is the imposter syndrome. And this is going to be by the following people: Saint Frinstra, Christopher Begunji, Mitchell Ryan, Fleur Rink, Junkie Stoker, and Jennifer Jordan. Pardon my pronunciation, but they made this incredible article that I'm going to take some information of. The imposter syndrome refers to the notion that some individuals feel as if they ended up in esteemed roles and positions, not because of their competencies, not because of their skills, but because of some oversight or stroke of luck. Despite the fact that imposter feelings are often linked to marginalized groups in society today, research predominantly approaches this phenomenon as an issue of the individual, pointing toward individuals for the roots and solutions of the syndrome. So we can see here that we are not pointing groups, which is pretty curious. It is something that starts with us in particular and then can be spread within a particular community or environment itself. Many successful people, from really, really famous people like Michelle Obama to the ex-COO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg, have expressed feeling like imposters. And now she has her own company, by the way. Such admissions typically describe feelings of having ended up in STEAM roles, not because of merits or achievement, but because of some oversight on the part of important gatekeepers or due to sheer luck. And I want to also add in here that people might also find like a great sense of luck, prestige, privilege in the equation, which makes it like more interesting. Despite their objective success, these individuals express difficulty internalizing their achievements and accomplishments and worry that they may be uncovered as frauds. This feeling is often referred to as the imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome. And I know some of us have been feeling like this or have felt like this even once in our life. Like probably the money that I got wasn't that much. Probably the achievement I just succeeded on wasn't the great thing, or something that I closed recently wasn't like a great deal. When we go to the roots of clinical psychology, scholars have predominantly depicted the imposter phenomenon as a personality trait that originates within individuals who experience imposter feelings. This focus on the individual level of analysis is most likely the result of the fact that the phenomenon is reflective, or it is practically the negative and critical self concept and the negative effects of an individual who experiences it. And actually, this also affects in a negative way how we are and how we just portray ourselves to the world at the end of the day. This individual, remember, level of understanding of imposter feelings is also reflected in empirical work on the phenomena. This line of research has, for instance, primarily operationalized and measured the imposter phenomenon as a trait. Moreover, scholars have predominantly pointed toward the individual to understand the roots and causes of imposter feelings. In this regard, researchers have, for example, regarding individuals' attachment styles, perfectionistic tendencies, and personality. So it affects the individual, also its personality, and then we can have some kind of, I put this in quotes, secondary effects that could lead to something bigger or complex in terms of clinical psychology. For example, because of the stereotype of the good leader possessing predominantly masculine traits, women are often depicted as lacking leadership qualities. So they are perceived as communal and warm as a stereotype, while men are portrayed as having a more natural fit for leadership positions. In response to these gender and leader stereotypes, research suggests that a woman may feel insecure and out of place if she were to achieve such a leadership position, as there just probably might be putting some kind of effort in continuing those kind of stereotypes previously signaled, both directly and indirectly, conscious and unconsciously, that she will not be a good fit for such position. First, research indeed suggests that a woman's awareness of such stereotypes can trigger her to feel like an imposter. Likewise, certain ethnic minorities are stereotyped as being unintelligent, lazy, and or underachieving. And I know you might be thinking more than one, something that you heard in school, something that you heard during work, and it could be leading to this. I also noticed that pointing out other people's supposedly flaws or defects is also some kind of way or the person to tell that or portray their insecurities to the world. In response to such negative portrayals of their group, ethnic minority students are likely to worry that their admission to, for instance, a prestigious university, for example, the consequence of that, if they pass, might be like an outcome of luck instead of something they actually deserved. They argue that to fully understand the imposter phenomenon, it is therefore important to complement the previous line of work at the individual level of analysis by adding a contextual perspective of imposter feelings. Although the phenomenon manifests at the level of the individual, that is, the individual feels like imposters. These individuals do not exist in a social vacuum. Instead, people's social context is of great importance in signaling how they feel about themselves. Social psychological research suggests that how people are treated by self-relevant others is an important precursor to imposter feelings. This is because individuals' everyday interactions are laced with important social evaluative cues. However, others see them as a person of value and worth. These social cues, it is like a guide to individuals' appraisals of their own self-worth, and thus shape their self-esteem and sense of being worthy or deserving of their place within that group or context. In traditionally white male-dominated occupations, for example, female and ethnic minority employees are often perceived and treated differently. Such subtle everyday oversights communicate that these employees' ideas, knowledge, and insights are valued less as that of other employees, which can in turn put long-lasting issues of confidence and engagement at work. And of course, this is going to create a bit of chaos within the work environment. And, of, and a clear differentiation between ranks, status sets, etc. inside a company. And of course, a feeling of not belonging to a place. Thus, to fully understand individuals' imposters' feelings, this research suggests that it is key to consider the quality of treatment people receive from others, particularly the types of treatment that communicates a sense of value, worth, and fit. In this regard, we contend that individuals may very well feel like imposters when they are treated in ways that suggest they are. Similarly, such imposter feelings can also be mitigated when these individuals are treated by others as a person of value and worth. And I want to compliment with a document by Joshi and Haley Mangid about unmasking the imposter syndrome. Members of minority populations are forced to hide behind a mask of stereotypes others associate to them. Individuals who feel fraudulent when they fulfill certain stereotypes associate their success to external forces. We find the problem as imposter syndrome. We're going to call it IS. Through Clance's research in 1985, it was found that imposter syndrome showed the following 6 characteristics: the imposter cycle, the need to be special or to be the very best, Superman, Superwoman aspects, fear of failure, denial of competence, and discounting praise, fear and guilt about success. IS and ethnic minorities. Research indicates that IS scores are higher for students in minority populations as a group. Coakley, McLean, and Cecil Martinez in 2013 designed a study that allowed them to compare IS and minority student status stress across a group of students in 3 distinct minority groups: African, American, Asian, and Latino. We're going to put minority student status stress as MSSS. While the authors found African American students reported experiencing the highest level of MSSS, imposter feelings were significantly high for Asian American students compared to other groups in the study. Coakley and others found that there was a strong correlation of MMS and IS with psychological distress and psychological well-being. However, when compared to the two, IS was the stronger predictor of psychological stress and had a negative effect on the psychological well-being of the individual. Individuals who suffer from the IS often believe that they have fooled others into overestimating their intelligence. Furthermore, these individuals are likely to attribute academic success to external factors and fear that they will be revealed as fraud. Intense feelings of IS can interfere with the academic development as well of high achievement underrepresented minorities by causing them to disengage from their academic endeavors. Avoid evaluative or exams, situationships, have constant feelings of inadequacy, and exhibit of unhealthy pressure to succeed. High achieving underrepresented minorities also report increased test anxiety, reduced confidence in their intelligence, and negative psychological outcomes such as depression. We're going to see this often in different academic documents, that there is some type of correlation between depression and anxiety as secondary or just consequential factors of the impostor syndrome in more than one dog. In the initial study of IS in 1978, Clance and Imes analyzed data for female participants only, due to their belief that IS occupied predominantly women population. Based on the attribution theory. The attribution theory in relation to IS suggests that women have lower expectations than men, so women attribute their success to a temporary cause. So that success, according to Yari in 2010, is going to be linked to another factor that may have correlation to this assumption, and the second wave of feminism. The second wave of feminism was a period of feminist activity and thought that first began in the early 1960s in the United States. It quickly spread across the Western world with an aim to increase equality rights for women by gaining more than just voting rights. Issues addressed by the second wave including rights regarding domestic issues and in employment, which was like pretty important as well. Results from the study conducted by Kazak and others in 2013 indicated that women reported more IS beliefs than men. And this is important because men were expected to seal it all and also to have equality, which can lead to imposter feelings on the women's side. Further, women are more likely to have overwhelming demands from multiple roles in their lives, and that's in general. The idea often originates from the stereotypic gender roles. If women internalize these gender roles, they are likely to endorse the societal beliefs that they are not as successful as men. On the other hand, one population yet to be included in the IS research is the LGBT plus community. During the critical coming out phase of identity formation, these individuals experience negative behavioral characteristics such as anxiety and shame often associated with the IS. Despite increasing levels of social and cultural acceptance of minorities, concern about the physical and psychological well-being of LGBT plus individuals persist. However, according to Blushill and Paulista in 2009, the lesbian participants are likely to report lower IS scores than straight women due to the high levels of gender roles in the LGBT plus community. Also, no current research has been having this kind of relationship between the imposter phenomenon and being part of the community itself. When IS is identified in a client or a patient, it is generally accompanied or just having like this kind of connection by the other psychological problems such as depression and we mentioned before, anxiety. Further, the imposter exhibits workaholic behaviors that lead to exhaustion and increase the risk of burnout. The rewards and recognition of their work is then associated with anxiety, stress, or work-life balance issues, causing the imposter to see both as undesirable and feeling not worthy at all. Clance in 1987 claims that the first identification of IS is during a counseling session. Thus, the client is already experiencing the symptoms to an extent that it needs mental health assistance. The symptom of perfectionism is a large identifier of the imposter syndrome. When a client believes that everything she does must conform to an internal standard of excellence that the therapist cannot distinguish from perfection, the imposter syndrome must be considered. Perfectionists have traits that can be easily identified. Are you a perfectionist? Let me know. Since IS is determined to be a discrepancy between one's perfection or perception of achievement and the success of others' perceptions, the use of group therapy is recommended. The group setting allows for individuals to break down the discrepancy and identity commonalities between members within the group, which can assist in building a supportive network. The topics Clance, Dickman, Revere, and Staver in 1995 had suggested to include the knowledge and understanding of IS, what feelings, thoughts, and behaviors may occur because of syndrome, and how others can support them when they fall into these thoughts, behaviors, and feelings. The final stage cleanse suggests that the individuals in group investigate and support others in not imposter phenomenon risks. The discussion topic includes individuals' wishes and dreams as well as their fear of failure when attempting to achieve them. Although these are personal differences in the extent to which people feel like imposters, we have shown that there is considerable theoretical or just a bunch of theories and conception clear standards of equal and inclusive treatment in the workplace. I think this is also important because we tend to think imposter syndrome equals to I'm not enough. And it's like imposter syndrome in my workplace, in my family, with my friends, and so on. Members of minority groups will be more likely to respond with lower incidences of imposter feelings as well. Overall, the aim is to help refocus the way in which both the scholars and the broader public consider the roots and solutions of the imposter phenomenon. And of course, to not just target a person as perfectionist or anxious as depressive. It's also in order to see like in a further look what is going on within the self and the individual itself. Our hope is that they will come to see the imposter phenomenon as not merely a dysfunctional syndrome, but that is my hope and the researchers' hope as well, the ones that I read, that resides within certain individuals, but instead as a psychological response to a dysfunctional contents. Consequently, there is hope to support future research that examines the role of individuals' social contexts in shaping their imposter feelings. Overall, such a shift in thinking about and empirically examining the imposter phenomena has the potential to lead to systematic change, which will create an environment in which everyone feels as though they really belong. This is further supported by Sakulko in 2011, who stated that 70% of the millennials experience imposterism at least once in their lifetime. It is recommended that the higher education bodies be willing to actively participate in creating awareness as well as implementing preventive measures of imposter syndrome. We recommend to be more educated, but we also recommend to be aware of the imposter syndrome itself. But why everyone feels like they are faking it? Leslie Jamison is going to tell us the story of Tiny. Before Pauline Clance developed the idea of the imposter phenomenon, now, to her frustration, more commonly referred to as imposter syndrome, she was known by the nickname Tiny or Teeny. Born in 1938 and raised in Baptist family, she was the youngest of six children, the daughter of a sawmill operator who struggled to keep food on the table and gas on his tank. Tiny was ambitious. Her photograph appeared in the local newspaper after she climbed a table during a debate tournament, but she was always second guessing herself. She would tell her mother, "I think I fell dead." She was shocked when she actually won, but she was the first in her family to go to college. And that's like a great goal, don't you think? But then we have those intrusive thoughts, now known as imposter syndrome. But that's been happening all this time. We're humans, so that is part of who we are. Is it? She was the first in her family to go to college, but what happened next? A high school counselor warned her, "You'll be doing well if you get this." The grade, let us see, after which she earned a PhD in psychology at the University of Kentucky. But everywhere she went, Clance felt the same sense of self-doubt, the suspicion that she would somehow trick everyone else into thinking she belonged. If you remember Clance, she was mentioned before. If you've been paying attention, the research I was mentioning in the past, more than one, Clance's name appears on each one of them. And that is a great success, is it? But what was happening is that in the early 70s, as an assistant professor at Oberlin College, Clance kept hearing female students confessing experiences that reminded her of her own. They were sure they would fail exams, even if they always did well. They were convinced that they would be admitted because there had been an error on their test scores, or that they were fooled authority figures into thinking they were smarter than they actually were. Flynn began comparing notes with one of her colleagues, Suzanne, about their shared feelings of fraudulence. Suzanne had grown up in Texas with an older sister who early on had been deemed the smart one, in quotes. As a high schooler, Suzanne had confessed anxieties to her mother that sounded exactly like the ones Clance had to hers. Suzanne particularly remembered crying after the Latin test, telling her mother, "I know I failed," when it turned out that she got an A. Her mother said, "I never want to hear about this again." But her accomplishment didn't make the feelings go away. It only made her stop talking about them. Until she met Clance. One evening, they threw a party for some of the Oberlin students. But the students looked disappointed and said, "We thought we were going to be learning something." They were hyper-vigilant, so intent of staving off the possibility of failure that they couldn't let loose for even a night. And that's actually really disappointing. We constantly tend to be expected to be tested by others, but why is that? There's like a constant feeling of being judged, misinterpreted, and also trying to exceed expectations about what others think about ourselves, about others' perspective. others' images about ourselves. Why is that? Even when you have the things in paper, even when you have the things right in front of you, that you're actually somebody that could see in whatever you might be thinking and doing, we tend to second guess ourselves constantly. Even in this example of what happened, the constant need of being tested, constant need to be under a test, societal test for some reason. So Clance and Suzanne turned the party into a class, setting up a circle of chairs and encouraging the students to talk. After, some of them confessed that they feel like imposters among their brilliant classmates. Clance and Suzanne started referring to the feelings they were observing as the imposter phenomenon. What do you think about this great introduction? I think that it's just putting the name as something that has been going on and on and on throughout the years. Putting the name as something that needed to be named in order for us to be conscious about it and to actually trying to correct it. Should it be corrected? Yes, because otherwise it would have been avoided. I don't want things to be put it on the side because they're like too uncomfortable or they can like release things about us that we don't want to know. Having a fear of failure equals that something is going on behind the curtains. Something is going on in our heads, in our minds. It's so unknowing everything about that is like first giving it a name. I know it's like a huge step. So coming forward with a solution or to coming forward with some kind of explanation that could just give us the chance to know what's going on with ourselves, which is great. The pair, Clance and Susan, spent 5 years talking to more than 150 successful women, students and faculty members at several universities, professionals in fields including law, nursing, and social work. Then they recorded their findings in a paper called The Imposter Phenomenon in High Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Interventions. They wrote that women in their sample were particularly prone to an internal experience of intellectual funniness, living in perpetual fear that some significant person will discover that they are indeed intellectual imposters. But it was precisely this process of discovery that helped Clance and Suzanne formulate the concept that we're talking about today. Thank you both. As they recognized feelings in each other and in their students, and they would be experiencing all their lives. At first, the paper kept getting rejected. Damn, really, we didn't get imposter feelings about that, Clance told me when I visited her at her home in Atlanta, and that would be Leslie. We believe in what we were trying to say. It was eventually published in 1978 in the journal called Psychotherapy Theory, Research, and Practice. The paper spread like an underground, let's say, let's rephrase it a bit, underground secret bakery. I don't know what people, when something is secret, something is prohibited, they want it more. We can talk about that in another video. Let me know. But people kept writing to Clance to ask for copies, and she sent out so many that the person working the copy machine in her department asked, "What are you doing with all this?" For decades, Clance and Suzanne saw their content steadily or just rapidly gaining traction. In 1985, Clance published a book called The Impostor Phenomenon and also released an official IP scale for researchers to listen or license for use in their own studies. But it wasn't until the rise of social media that the idea, by now rebranded as imposter syndrome, truly exploded. And do you think fans will be like mad for us to change the name? Let me know in the comments. Almost 50 years after its formulation, the concept has achieved a level of cultural saturation that Clance and Suzanne never imagined. Clance maintains a list or just a list of studies and articles that have referenced their original idea. It is now more than 200 pages long. The concept has inspired a micro-industry of self-help books ranging in tone from hashtag girl boss, self-empower, and more. And this is really true. I think that when we're starting to dig in ourselves, now all this rebranding of wellness, inner child, self-worth, and others just arise from the ground, especially during COVID. And now we're seeing those lively more than other decades before because we didn't care that much about mental health. And of course, some situations, even today's situations, about words, about news, about work environments, and more, are making us be like more conscious of what's going on with our mental state and emotional balance. And yes, nowadays it's being used for everything, for good and for bad. For trying to have like an eating talk and for people to taking it to sell courses. Which is fine, I mean, I'm not judging. But even for merchandising, even for speech, even for a TV special, it's have been appearing all over the place. But here you have the reason why it has started to come forward, and you can attach it to other events as well. About this popular series of events that made the imposter syndrome to arise so lively today. But to be honest, having to examine self-talk and to feel some kind of self-love rhetoric with creating our affirmations and accomplishments is something also that shows that we are trying to be more aware of what we do and who we are. The phrase imposter syndrome often elicits a fierce sense of identification, especially from millennial and Gen X women. I love that one. When I put out a call on, when Leslie put out a call on Twitter, our dear Leslie, for experiences of imposter syndrome, she was, of course, receiving a bunch of responses. Like some of them would be like 180,000. And so that's like a lot, of them. One of them is from a graduate of Trinity College that confessed that her feelings of fraudulence were so strong that she would be unable to enter the college's library for her entire first year. And this was at the Trinity College, Dublin. The university administrator said, I grew up on a pig farm in rural Illinois. Whenever I attended a fancy event, even if it is one I am producing, I feel like people will still see my hair or just the type of dust that you tend to get on the farm. He was afraid he will people will notice that. And that's so, I don't want to say awful, but interesting perspective. How we actually, people might say Having fears, we mentioned the three characteristics. That is something. The six characteristics are that is one of them. But some people might say insecurity as well. Do they correlate? Let's leave the question right there. This is the one when everyone will find out you don't know what you're doing. Exactly. In fact, Clance and Suzanne argue forcefully in their original study that success was not a cure. That's 100% correct. Maya Angelou once said, I have written 11 books, but each time I drink, they're going to find out now. I've run a game of everybody, and they're going to find me out. Oh my god. I love this phrase. I love this. I love this quote in general. Like, they're going to find out now. Let's put that on a camera. Success isn't going to be directly aligned with high esteem, perhaps, with just feeling as people that we deserve more than we actually have. And it's fine to feel like you deserve more because sometimes we look back and we aren't able to see the things that we've done and to feel good about the results of some of them. Neil Gaiman, in a in an address that went viral, described his fear of being busted by the fraud police, and I put that in comments. He imagined showing up at his store with a clipboard to tell him he had no right to live the life he was living. Oh my god. Also, Mando report feeling like his imposters. The experience is primarily associated with women, and the word imposter has been granted special, let's say, woman intended forms. Why is that? Clance and Suzanne remain stunned by how broadly their idea has circulated. Even though we had no idea, Suzanne said. We were just as surprised as everyone else. But their ambitions were never small. Suzanne says, we saw suffering in a lot of people, and we hope we could help. Suzanne told me. We wanted to change people's life. And they did, but not life's perspective, I would say. And I love that they actually published a book about it. Now 84 years old, Clance has a slight, bird-like frame and is nimble-minded and affable. And 84 years old when this was published at the New Yorker. Dropping a wool blanket and sipping on a protein shake, she told me about years of therapeutic work with clients experiencing an imposter phenomenon, where that often focus on early family dynamics, and that Leslie took note about that. Clance and Suzanne's original paper identified two distinct family patterns that gave rise to imposter feelings. Either woman had a sibling who had been identified as the smart one, or else they themselves had been identified as superior in every way: intellect, personality, appearance, talent. The pair theorize that women in the first group are driven to find a validation they didn't get at home, but end up doubting whenever validation later comes their way. Those in the second group encounter a disconnect between their parents' unrealistic faith in their capacities and the experience of basically what life could bring. For both types of imposters, the crisis comes from the disjunction between the messages received from their parents and the messages received from the world. Are my parents right? Or is the world right? Are my parents right? That means, am I perfect? Or is the world right? Meaning, am I failing? This gap gives rise to a conviction that either the parent is wrong or the world is. But this scenario of maybe they're right or maybe I am worth what they're saying about me never shows up. Never shows up. The imposter begins to do everything possible to prevent being discovered in her self-perceived deficiencies. Clance and Suzanne cite one client who, as a child, pretended to be sick for 3 consecutive Fridays when spelling bees were held. She could not bear the thought of her parents finding out she could not win the spelling contest. Another client pretended to be playing with art supplies instead of studying whenever her mother walked into the room, because her mother had taught her that naturally smart people don't have to study. And this one is pretty dangerous to be spread. Clance and Suzanne describe the cycle that imposter feelings often produce: a sense of impending failure that inspires hard work and short-lived gratification when failure is just coming into the door, quickly followed by the return of the old conviction that failure is imminent. Some women adopt a kind of magical thinking about their pessimism, daring to live in success would actually doom them to failure, so failure must be anticipated instead. And that could become something about a kind of symptom of anxiety, for example, and some frenetic behaviors. And why is that? Because when we try to overthink about things that are going to be appearing in the future, when trying to basically guess the future, and there could be A, B, C, D, and more possibilities about an existing future that is about to come, but we don't have the necessary tools to be as accurate about it as possible. So that could drive us a bit crazy throughout the time. Trying to guess the future in order for us to prevent failure is also causing us to be led to some kind of losing our minds and not having a great balance mental and emotional life. That also happens. So failure must be anticipated instead. Is it right? The typical case hides her own opinions, fearing that they will be seen as stupid. She might seek the approval of a mentor, but then believe it has been secure only because of charm or appeal. She may hate herself for even needing this validation, taking the need itself as proof of her intellectual funniness. And what do you think about it? Repeated successes usually don't break the cycle. Clance and Suzanne emphasize all the efforts and mental calculations that are directed into preventing the discovery of one's inadequacy and fraudulences ultimately just reinforce the belief in this inadequate, fraudulent version of the self, and that is true. Clance has since clients heal not by success but by the kind of resonance she found with Suzanne. Sustained by a group therapy with other women, it's easier to believe other women are imposters. They can then bring this recognition of others' delusion back to themselves. Facing the thoughts that you have with other people's realities also helps a lot. It's like that's why we have like different cycles of support today. Because when you talk about it, and actually when you find out that opposite people have been having this kind of auto-sabotage, candid, and way of thinking, relating to other people's story and limitations could also help us to grow on an inner perspective. They can bring this recognition of other solution back to themselves. Sometimes clients ask clients to keep a notebook recording how they deflected compliments. Clients also often give clients homework assignments, such as asking them to study for only 6 hours for an upcoming test rather than 12. The mere idea of this gave me a pang of anxiety, and I ventured that it would be terrible if they ended up failing as a result. She nodded. Yep, then you really set them back. Again, this preparation, planification ahead in order to not fail. Yeah, that could be something that could happen in the future. We are in failure proof. But if you're trying to lead your future to that specific event, guess what's going to happen, right? But talking seriously, don't prepare for failure, prepare for success. Clance and Suzanne have remained friends and both relocated from Ohio to Atlanta nearly 4 years ago. Clance to teach at Georgia State, Suzanne to get a PhD there. For a while, they even practiced therapy in the same building. Stucco house tucked away at the end of the long shaded driveway where Suzanne still sees clients. I met her there the day after Stacy Evans lost her second bet, and the neighborhood was prepared with lawn signs that now seem a bit distant, let's say. Suzanne's outfit was a cozy den of soft couches and throw pillows, walls hung with quilts, and a Peruvian rice goddess dangling above us. Suzanne has white curly hair and wore dark red lipstick and bulky clocks that she slip off immediately. I think better without shoes, she said, so that she could place her feet beside me on the couch. Never like Leslie telling us this. Just having into account the fact that how therapy can be held as well. It's a bit refreshing. A bookshelf behind her future family photos from her clients. Suzanne asked if I got anxious before interviews like this, confessing that she always does. And soon I was talking about how shy I've been in junior high school and how I still worried that the grown interview questions would expose how little I knew about the subject or somehow reveal that I'm not a real journalist. Suzanne told me that her own imposter feelings appeared when she was applying for PhD programs while studying at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. But as a therapist, she found the Gestalt approach well suited to to actually resonate with such feelings. She explained that the Gestalt method involves owning all the various parts of yourself, accepting them instead of trying to get rid of them, and understanding their function in the larger whole. In this way, the approach offers not only an antidote to the belief in a shameful self at the core of one's being, a kernel that must be concealed, but also an intrinsic understanding of the self as many selves rather than static or overly coherent. Both Suzanne and Clance underwent Gestalt therapy, and Clance found that the work helped her recognize more fully what her mother, not always a deeply nurturing presence in her life, had done for her and for their whole family. When she asked Suzanne if when if actually coming through with delusions about her own deficiency had been connecting to her primal delusion of her mother as a deficient mother, she said yes, absolutely. Ultimately, she felt that her mother was able to appreciate the career she built and the person she had become. One time she was visiting home and her mother called on her to talk to a relative in distress. Teeny, you need to get down here because he's going to subscribe from the life himself. The request seemed like proof that her mother understood the importance of her work. In that moment, Clance felt some congruence between the messages she was getting from the world and the messages she was getting from her mother. And that also is called validation. Reducing the gap she helped other women notice in her childhood. As part of the process of understanding and accepting various aspects of the self, just thought after involves empty share work in which you might have an imagined conversation with someone important, a dead mother, a former lover, and play out both parts of the conversation, sometimes switching chairs in order to recon with the lasting influence of the relationship. A philosophy pointing toward integration makes sense as an antidote to imposter feelings, which can feel like selective self-presentation driven by shame. I can show only this part of myself and must keep that part of myself hidden. On one of the cornerstones of the work Clance and Suzanne did with their clients actually was an empty chair exercise in which they were asked to imagine having conversation with all the authority figures they ever tricked into thinking they were smarter and more competent than they actually were. Clients would gently invite them to consider the ways that their imposter feelings constituted, implicitly, a kind of understanding everyone else and so easily tricked, telling them, line up all the professors you fooled and say, I fooled you. We all now say, I fooled all the people in the past. But going back to the matter, the first time that this could be something like accurate for me and for you right now might be also reliving, like for you to actually breathe after a long, long time of thinking that you aren't enough, right? Having the time to just encounter yourself, defending yourself, and defending yourself towards others as well. I think it's a really great exercise after all. But what about something more intriguing about the thinking of an imposter syndrome and thinking that you wanted to do things and wanted to think things between different kinds of situations. But having said that, have you ever felt that your competence or intelligence have been underestimated in some way or another? Let me know. Let's talk about Adira Landry, an emergency medicine physician at Brigham and Women's Hospital and a faculty member at Harvard Medical School. She commented about her first day in the UCLA Med School. Landry, a first generation college student from an African American family, met a fellow first year student in med who was already wearing a white coat, although they hadn't yet had their white coat ceremony. His mother was in healthcare and his sister was in the med school, and they informed him that if he wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, which he did, it would be beneficial to start shadowing someone immediately. And Adira went home that night feeling desperate, as if she were already falling behind, and a classmate told her, "Don't worry, you just have imposter syndrome." Since then, Adira has had countless conversations with the students who feel they are struggling with imposter syndrome, and she usually senses a palpable relief when she suggests that they are feeling like this because there is something wrong with them apparently, but in reality, they are enveloped into a system that actually encourage this kind of thoughts and feelings in general. You might be thinking, this is not fair. But what is fair? Our own demands or society's demands? Who knows? The ones we put on ourselves or the ones we put in others as expectations to feel and to actually develop the best way possible, right? Because we need to exceed expectations. We need to be better. Well, what people don't tell you is the how, and that is what drives us crazy. Would you mind taking a step back, think about everything that you have to do or supposedly have to do, and then making your own decision? Or would you rather just don't waste time and act right away, instead giving yourself the time to think and breathe? What do you think about this episode? What do you think about what was said in this video? Have you ever felt like an imposter before? Not enough, unintelligent, not capable of. And did you like knowing a bit of the roots about this concept at all? I think it's really popular nowadays, but few people know where it comes from and how to actually deal with it. Here I give you some tools, but I would like you to express your stories because remember, group therapy might be one of the greatest solutions for it. I cannot give you that right now, but in the comment section, I know you might feel identified. If one or two, if comment their stories. If not, go to some communities online. Try to talk with your friends about it, family members and such. I think we all have a little imposter inside us. Do you have yours?